So, how many of y'all watch documentaries, nature documentaries and stuff? Just you? Oh man. Okay, sweet. Okay, cool. All right, good. So I'm not the only nature geek in here. We're going to talk about some rare animals today. I've got some pictures. What I want to do is redeem your eyes after PJ a few weeks ago put the picture of that thing called the eye. Y'all remember that scary, horrible looking thing? No, I'm not. No, because this is redemption. These are some of the rarest creatures on Earth. This is the northern hairy-nosed wombat, right? It's not the regular hairy-nosed wombat or the southern. This is the northern hairy-nosed wombat. They think there are roughly 230 of these things left. And then next we've got the rare vaquita. This is like a really, really small dolphin. They think there are maybe 30 of these things left out in the wild. They've got a few in captivity. And then finally we have the three-toed pygmy sloth. Everybody want to pet one of those? Everybody's going, aww. That always makes me think of what has, Okay, there's less than 100 of these things left. There's another rare creature. Go to the next picture, and it's in this picture, but you can't see it in that picture. It can be found in that kind of habitat. It can also be found in the next one. There we go. This creature also lives in that habitat too. You can't see it, but it is there, and it can even be. Go to the next picture. It can even be found in this kind of habitat too. But only for people who are really looking. And you've probably figured out that the rare creature that I'm talking about is not a creature. It's a rare thing. And the rare thing that I'm talking about is silence. Have you ever watched the documentary and they get to the part where there's some cute little fluffy animal and it's running from some kind of predator and there's this really close chase and everybody's getting really scared, and just when it looks like the fluffy cuddle bunny or whatever it is about to be eaten, it narrowly escapes the jaws of whatever predator, right? You seen that? Uh-huh. Yes. Y'all are going to be really good at what I'm talking about today, silence. And then they always follow that up with something like the narrator will go, after the narrow escape, when we're going, glad that thing escaped, the narrator will always say something like, but there's another predator that is a far greater danger to the fluffy cuddle bunny. And you're supposed to go, what is this horrible predator? We must eradicate it, right? And then what is the predator always? It's us, stupid humans. In this case, humans are the threat. And actually, that's the case with so many of these other things too. But humans are the threat to silence and stillness and solitude. Silence and stillness and solitude are an internal truth. They're an internal reality, right? And sometimes noise enters through our ears, sometimes it enters through our eyes, sometimes it enters through our emotions, interactions that we have with people, but we live in a noisy culture. How many of you have ever thought to yourself, man, I just wish I had a little more noise in my life, right? I just wish there was a little more static. Yeah, sure. I wish there was a little more static in my life and then I'd be happy. Has anybody ever thought that? We're aware of so much noise in our lives, but we do so little about it. In fact, we voluntarily welcome more noise into our lives. We get up in the morning. I thought about asking you to raise your hand, but I don't want to shame anybody. How many of you get up? Don't raise your hand, but how many of you get up and you turn on the TV or the radio first thing? Or maybe it's already on because you left it on. Somebody's pointing at somebody else over there. Or maybe it was on all night long. And then you get in your car, radio's on the whole way to work, and maybe it's news, and there's so much noise in the news today. There's so little pure information. Maybe it's songs, maybe it's even Christian radio, and even that can sometimes be noise. And then you get to work and you're surrounded by the noise that tells you what you need to worry about and what you need to be concerned about. If we don't fix this problem, your world's going to fall apart. You're surrounded by noise that tells you that your value is based on how you perform there, right? And that's noise. Then we get in our cars, we go back home, surrounded by more noise, surrounded by people who are just impatient to get home. All these billboards, hundreds of billboards shouting messages at you, and you get home, maybe you turn the TV on again, even if you're not watching it, and it's there in the background. Commercials telling you that if you act now, you can buy a little bit more joy and satisfaction, but if you don't act now, you're going to miss out. And all of the, what? 2 for the price of what? 2 happinesses for the price of one. And you open your laptop and you get online and you browse the internet. Social media is so much noise. It can be used for some good things, but for the most part, there's just so much noise on there. Never before have we had such an opportunity to just express our opinions. And Proverbs says, the fool takes no delight in understanding, but only in expressing their opinion. And social media is full of this, and we're conditioned to respond to it. We have an emotional response when somebody likes what we say on Facebook or Instagram. We have an emotional response to these commercials, to the shows that we watch on TV. We condition ourselves. Not only do we not tune it out, but we welcome more and we respond to it. And we carry around one of the biggest sources of noise in our pockets, right? This right here is one of the major sources of noise in our lives. And excuse me. Yep. What are you doing? Hey, dude, I'm preaching. Yo, PJ, preaching. Excuse me. Sorry, that's rude. I asked him to do that. So, yes, please.
Are you kidding? Or are you?
No, not kidding. No, really do stop. Okay, here you go. So, if you and I are standing and having a conversation, and we're talking about something, and if PJ were to get up and jump in between us and start an entirely different conversation, how would we feel about that? That's rude, right? He's bringing noise into this connection that we're trying to have. On the other hand, if you and I are standing there talking, and PJ could be standing way over there, and just in the same room, and he calls one of us, when this thing goes off, it's like there are neurons attached from this thing to your hand goes in your pocket, and you go and you break whatever's going on here, right? Then it's not rude for some reason in our culture. If he texts us, he could text you exactly the same thing, start a conversation that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, and so many people are conditioned to respond to this when it goes off. You could be sitting here in worship, you could be having a conversation with somebody, you could be having dinner with your family, and when this thing goes off, we tend to go, hold on just a second, and you get back to that person. This person takes priority, right? This is noise. How many of you have ever received a text or gotten a phone call? Well, don't answer this, but rarely. In fact, I don't think I've ever gotten like a life or death matter text or phone call. Like if I don't answer this right now, somebody's going to die. It's never happened to me. And when we are surrounded by all of this noise, we don't hear from the still, small voice of God. And this goes hand in hand with what PJ talked about last week with meditation. That's letting God's word, letting God's written word, his voice that he spoke to us through his written word, soak in and change us and transform us. And in order to do that, first we've got to shut out the noise and pursue silence and solitude. The term still small voice comes from this passage in 1 Kings 18. There's this story of this prophet named Elijah. He was kind of a big shot in the Old Testament. It's during a time when things were not going well for Israel. The Israelites were turning away from God in droves. And Elijah was sent by God to call people back to him. And during this particular time, the god that they were turning to was named Baal. They were turning to this god named Baal. And all the priests of Baal were putting to death the people who weren't turning to Baal. So Elijah was calling everybody back to Baal. Finally, one day, Elijah goes, all right, look, my God can kick your God's butt, and we're going to have a showdown and prove which God is the real God. And there was this showdown up on Mount Carmel, and you've got Elijah and God in one corner, and you've got 400 prophets of Baal in the other corner. And they're both going, we're going to prove that our God's real. And God shows up in this spectacular way. All of these Israelites who have come out there to kind of watch the show fall down on their faces and say, the Lord, he is God. And so now Elijah's feeling pretty good. He's going, okay, finally, God, you're doing something. Finally, things are happening. Now, maybe Israel is going to come back to God. So he's feeling good. He goes into town, and there he gets word that Queen Jezebel has got a warrant out for his death. She's going to kill him. So he's bummed. He goes out into the wilderness, 40 days and 40 nights, way out into the wilderness, and he holes up in a cave. And God comes to him out there and says, what are you doing here? And Elijah goes, and I'm paraphrasing here, Elijah says, God, I've been very zealous for you. I've been doing what you asked me to do. I've been calling the Israelites back to you. I've been sticking up for you. And I thought something good was happening back there on Mount Carmel. I thought that was the beginning of something, but they've killed everybody else who's following you. I'm the only one left, he thinks, and now they're going to kill me too. So God says, all right, I'm going to pass by this cave, and when I do, I want you to come out to the mouth of the cave, and we're going to have a little chat. So Elijah's in the cave, and this huge windstorm, this powerful windstorm blows by, tears up the rocks. And then there's a powerful earthquake, and then there's this raging fire. But it says God wasn't in any of those things. But then the fire was followed by, English typically says, a still small voice. The Hebrew actually says something like a thin silence. And God was in the thin silence. And Elijah knew that God was there. So he covers his face and he goes and he stands out at the mouth of the cave. And again, I'm paraphrasing here, but what God says to him is, Elijah, you're looking for me to show up in big, spectacular ways. You want me to change everything all at once. But that's not how I'm going to do anything. That's your idea. That's not my idea. And sure, I can show up as fire and wind and earthquake, just as I did with Moses, just as I did on Mount Sinai, just like I spoke to Job out of the whirlwind. I can do that, but typically I'm going to speak and act and move in still small ways. And that's what he's saying to Elijah. He says, I've got a plan, it's just not your plan. And I don't know why God tends to speak and move and act that way, except that it fits with so many other things that God's word says. So there's a passage in Deuteronomy, it'll be up on the screen, Deuteronomy chapter 6. It's well known by the Jewish people. Even today, this is like central to their theology. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your might. It's called the Shema, this passage is. And it's because the first word, if you can go to the next screen, the first word in there, hear, O Israel, is the word Shema. So they call this the Shema. The word Shema means hear in English, but really it means something more like listen and obey. Hear what I'm saying to you and then act upon it. Hear that I'm saying that there's one God, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. In Jeremiah 29, God says, you will seek me, and you will find me when you seek me with all of your heart. This theme of wholehearted pursuit of God, wholehearted love of God is all over the Bible. So God speaking and moving in still small ways and in silence fits with this, because the person who is willing to shut out the noise and pursue silence and listen for that still small voice because they're seeking him with all their heart, that's the person who's going to hear from God. If we've got a bunch of noise in our lives, it's going to be really, really hard to hear from God. And God is not going to very often shout over the noise in your life. So I want to do a demonstration. You've all just been volunteered, but I do need one volunteer. You want to volunteer? Okay, so I just need you to stand up right where you are. Okay, so if we can put the next screen up, the rest of you, here's your job. Some of you pick the left half, and some of you pick the right half, and y'all are going to read these out loud, okay? And I want you to read them out loud, not sort of timidly like we tend to be, all right? Y'all need to generate a lot of noise. So let's practice that one part, okay? I'm going to count to 3 and then say go, all right? 1, 2, 3, go.
Make sure you don't leave your crock pot on overnight, because you might set your house on fire.
Awesome. All right. Now, here's what's going to happen next. I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to say something to you, and your job is to listen to what I'm saying, okay? But I'm going to cover my mouth so you're not reading my lips. I'm going to turn this off, okay? All right? You ready? Y'all got this? How do I mute this thing?
Make sure you don't leave your crock pot on overnight, because you might set your house on fire.
All of this noise that tells you other things you need to be thinking about and concerned about. How many of you know what the left half is referring to? Yeah, right? And how many of you know what the right half is referring to? Right? These are things that are going on in our world, and they're putting noise into our heads and generating fears and concerns. And over those fears and concerns, it's kind of hard to hear God saying, hey, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and I love you, and I'm in control. I got this. Kind of hard to hear that over the noise, right? We have got to be deliberate about shutting out the noise. I've never been watching a documentary about a rare animal that was filmed out of somebody's living room. Right? I've never seen an episode where the cameraman was sitting in his living room watching Netflix, and some rare creature comes and knocks on his window, and he goes, hey, dude. And the guy gets his camera out, and the creature's going, here I am, right here. Anybody ever seen that? When you see footage of these rare animals, they've gone after them. They've gone looking for them. And we're going to have to go and look for silence if we're going to hear the still, small voice of God. And let me just tell you that God does still speak. He's not silent. Now, he's spoken to us through his word, right? So many people don't hear God speaking to them because they don't take time to listen to God's word that he's spoken. And he has said so much. And I've heard so many people who are in their 80s and 90s who have been reading God's word most of their life, and they'll say things like, man, every time I open this book, I feel like I'm seeing something new. So God speaks to us through his word. But God will speak to us personally too. Never new theology. He's never going to change doctrine on us. He's never going to say anything that doesn't already agree with what's in his word. In fact, usually when he speaks to you personally, what he's going to be doing is taking something you've already heard in his word and driving it from your head down into your heart. And it's going to hit you in a new way, and it's going to apply to some situation that you're dealing with. Most of the time, that's what it's going to be when God speaks to you. Or maybe you've got a big decision to make, and God's going to give you a piece about, I want you to do this. And if God doesn't give you a piece about doing this, then he doesn't care what you decide, just take him with you, right? Sometimes God will prompt you to maybe go pick up the phone, this phone. Sorry, I just dated myself back in the 80s. Pick up this phone and go and call somebody and talk to them and say, hey, how are you doing? Can we go get coffee? Stuff like that. God will speak to you and say these kinds of things to you. God does still speak. So, in order to hear him, though, we've got to be deliberate about shutting out the noise. So there are a lot of ways that we can do that. And one of the biggest ways that we can shut out the noise is just stop talking. We generate so much of the noise in our world. I mean, it's all generated by humans, right? Never before, as I said, have we had such a voice to just speak to thousands and thousands of people. And so much of what we tend to say, if we're not really thinking, is just noise. We've got a few. Oh man, the screen dude got up. I got some verses. Oh, wow. Okay, Levi. So I feel a little bit embarrassed about going on here with these verses then. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise when he closes his lips. He is deemed intelligent, right? The next one is, go to the next one here, James 1:9. That's not the right verse. It should be James 9:1. I think it's James 9:1. There is no James 9:1. Anyway, what it says is, be slow to speak, quick to listen, slow to become angry. Be quick to listen. You found it? No? 19. Okay. Anyway, be slow to speak. He says, be slow to speak. Be quick to listen. This is not something that's popular in our culture. If we get to the next verse, Levi, he's probably looking up James 1:19. Next one. All right. This is David saying, set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth. Keep watch over the door of my lips. We need supernatural help sometimes to just be quiet. So much of what we say is just voicing our opinion. So much of what we say, actually a lot of what we say is us trying to control other people, isn't it? You get an idea, you've got something that you want to see happen, and so you subtly try to manipulate the people around you into getting on board so that that thing will happen. And I think we're so good at this that we do it without knowing. We do it without going, oh, I'm going to purposely manipulate this person. But we're trying to control them. Or maybe even the bigger thing is we're trying to control what other people think about us. We might say something and then reevaluate what we said or did and go, oh, you know what, I shouldn't have said that. And then you generate more words to try to excuse what you did, try to explain away what you did. Here's why I did that, so I want you to be on board so that you don't think badly of me. Or maybe you'll do something that's actually good, but it gets misread and the other person doesn't understand it. So you've got to justify yourself and make sure that person is thinking correctly about you, right? We do this, don't we? The thing is, when we do that, we're forgetting that over and over, God says, I am your shield. I am your defender. I am your justifier. In Exodus 14, the Israelites are fleeing Egypt, and they're thinking things are going pretty well, but then they come up against the Red Sea, and they're standing there at the Red Sea. The Egyptian army is bearing down on them, and they're about to be slaughtered, and they're kind of in a panic. And in Exodus 14:14, God says, I will defend you. Yours is only to remain silent. And when we spend so much effort justifying ourselves, we're not trusting in that God's got our backs. He's going to defend you. And if he doesn't rush to your defense, maybe you didn't actually need defending. But this comes from being addicted to what other people think about us, and so we generate noise. So there are other ways that we can pursue silence. We can voluntarily turn off our TVs. Turn off your TV for a whole weekend. And you may not find out what happened to so-and-so on some show, but I bet your life will still go on. And I bet if you keep doing that and keep missing that show, you'll eventually get to the point that you go, why did I care so much about these fake people? You can voluntarily avoid social media for a while. For some of you, you're like, I don't care, I don't use social media anyway. But some of us use it a whole bunch. There are some good things that can happen on social media, but so much of it is just noise. How many of you have been sitting at your TV, sitting at your computer, browsing, and an hour goes by, and you go, oh my gosh, I just blew an hour, and I wish I could have that hour back. I didn't learn anything. I didn't grow through this. And now I'm all anxious about stuff that's not even involving me. So you can voluntarily avoid social media. Here's a tricky one, okay? You can ignore this when it goes off. If you're having a conversation with somebody, don't let this bring noise into that conversation. You can ignore it when you're having dinner with your family or your friends. I've heard of people who, when they're out having dinner with friends, they all put their phones on the table face down, and if anybody answers their phone in the middle of dinner before dinner is over, they have to pay for everybody, right? So you could adopt that kind of policy. But especially if you're having dinner with your family, the world will go on without you. God is in control, okay? But we have a hard time doing that. And then the other thing is pursue silence in the moments that you've got opportunities. Like when you're driving to work, don't turn the radio on. When you would normally be browsing the internet, don't browse the internet. Go and pursue silence. Now, some people are uncomfortable with silence and stillness. We've become so adjusted to all this noise that some people get very uncomfortable. And I've heard some people say, when I'm talking about stillness and silence, usually it's in the conversation about reading books, because I like to read, and some people will go, I don't really like to read because I can't sit still that long. And if that's you, then I want to challenge that thinking about yourself. I want to challenge you to evaluate, what does that mean that you can't sit still that long? Psalm says, be still and know that I'm God. You don't need to be up and generating activity and doing things and talking. The world actually, I've got the world in my hands, and I don't need you. And it's going to be okay. This is voluntarily acting and trusting that God actually has got the world in his hands, and that he's got plans, and that he's setting them into motion. And he doesn't actually need your help, although he invites you to participate, right? What if we spent as much or more time pursuing silence and solitude and listening to the still small voice of God as we did worrying about the problems in our lives and chewing on them and mulling over them and figuring out how to solve them, or just worrying about them, not even coming up with solutions, just giving into worry. What if we spent more time listening to God's voice and pursuing silence so we could hear that? What if we spent just as much time in silence listening to God's voice as we do browsing the internet or watching TV or listening to the radio or watching the news? Do you think it would affect your peace? Do you think that it might affect your closeness with God, your sense of His presence with you? Do you think that it would affect your confidence that everything's going to be all right in the long run? Do you think that it might affect your wisdom about what you need to do next? So, silence should not be a rare thing for us Christians. Jesus regularly went away out on his own, got away from the crowds. It was a habit of his. It's all over the Gospels. And I guarantee you, now this isn't specifically stated in God's Word, I guarantee you that when he was away from the crowds, there were people getting sick and dying that he could have been healing. There was good work being left undone, and he probably knew about it. And you can probably also bet that there were people who were going, where was Jesus when I needed him? Where was Jesus when my parent or my spouse or my sibling or my friend was dying? He was out spending time with his Father, leaving this stuff undone. That's one of the main things that keeps us from silence. So I've got stuff to do. It's too important. I can't let it go undone. I don't think we've got anything so important that if we don't do it, somebody's going to die. And yet Jesus pursued silence. So we should too, and find out that it's a blessing, that God's voice fills us with riches, fills us with peace, fills us with hope, fills us with joy, fills us with wisdom, fills us with satisfaction, takes away stress, takes away anxiety, takes away questions and confusion and depression. So let's pursue the still small voice of God. Let's be that